All right, let's talk about something truly fascinating today. We're going to dive into the incredible story of a literary tradition, one that was born out of a really complex and, let's be honest, often difficult relationship. We're talking about the evolution of Indian English poetry. And really, it all boils down to this one huge question. How does a nation find its voice, but in the language of its colonizer? I mean, think about that for a second. That's the core conflict, the central tension we're going to unpack today. Okay, so let's jump right in. Where does this story even begin? Well, interestingly, it's not with a poet, not at all. It starts with the language itself, right in the middle of colonial India. So you might be asking, what exactly are we talking about when we say Indian English poetry? I mean, on the surface, the definition seems simple, right? It's poetry written in English by Indian poets. But trust me, it goes so much deeper. It's really a direct response to history. It's this complex, ongoing conversation between colonialism, language, and this powerful search for cultural identity. Now, what's really wild is that the first major Indian poet to write in English doesn't even show up until the 1800s. But the seeds for this were planted centuries before. I mean, we're talking as far back as the 15th century, when you start to see the Indianization of English. Then jump to the 17th century, the East India Company arrives, and its members are writing these travelogues. By the 18th, you even have English poets in India writing about Indian subjects. So you can see, the stage was slowly but surely being set. You know, a great way to think about all this is like a river. And in these early centuries, it's not a rushing river just yet. It's more like the very first trickles, little streams. A bit of word borrowing here, some descriptions of the culture there. It wasn't a powerful current for sure, but the water was definitely starting to gather. So what happens next? How does this build? Well, this is where those little streams we talked about, they start to come together. They merge and they begin to form a real, actual current that you can see. So how did that happen, right? It wasn't just magic. There were three really crucial catalysts. First, in 1780, India gets its very first English newspaper. Boom! Then, in 1817, Hindu College is founded, and that creates this major hub for Western-style education. And if that wasn't enough, British policy itself starts promoting English literature. So all of a sudden, the language has a public platform, it has a growing class of educated writers, and it has official prestige. It's the perfect storm. And this right here, this quote just sums it all up perfectly. English wasn't just some foreign language anymore. No, it became a passport to privilege and prestige. And that really explains why the very first wave of Indian English poetry was mostly an urban upper-class thing. I mean, having access to this new world, that was everything. And then comes the person who basically lit the fuse for this whole thing, Henry de Rosio. In the early 19th century, he becomes the first major Indian poet to write in English. And he wasn't just a writer, he was called the moving spirit of this entire era. He was the one who proved, hey, this can be done. So now the foundations are set. They're solid. And what happens next is that the whole genre just enters this period of incredible confidence, of real mastery. A golden age is about to begin. We're talking about the last quarter of the 19th century specifically. This is what people call the golden era of early Indo-Anglican poetry. And the big shift here is that poets weren't just kind of experimenting anymore. Oh no. They were mastering the big English styles of the day. The super emotional, nature-focused romantic style and the more formal, buttoned-up Victorian style. And crucially, they were making them their own. And if you want a perfect example of this, look no further than Toru Dutt. I mean, they called her the Keats of Indo-Anglian literature. She did something just remarkable. She took these ancient, powerful stories and legends from India and she wove them into this beautiful, sophisticated English verse. It was a perfect blend of Indian soul and English form. A true genius of the golden era, no question. Okay, so let's do a quick recap of how we got here. We started with the Rosio's incubation period, right? Then came the rise of more prominent poets mid-century. That led us to the golden era of Toru Dutt, and then we move into the early 20th century, which was all about mysticism, with huge figures like Tagore and Sarojini Naidu. Got it? Good. Because hold on to that thought. Everything is about to change big time. Yeah, that lyrical, kind of flowery Victorian style, it couldn't last forever. It just couldn't. By the middle of the 20th century, a brand new movement shows up on the scene. And this one was ready to trade all that romanticism for a dose of raw reality. Yup, the modernists arrived. And poets like Nissim Ezekiel and A.K. Ramanujan, they had a completely different playbook. They just stripped away all that old, sentimental stuff. And what did they replace it with? Realism, irony, and this incredibly deep, honest exploration of the self and what it meant to live in modern India. And wow, if you want to feel the power of this new spirit of ownership, just listen to this from Kamala Das. This quote, it's just everything. She's not asking permission to use English, she is claiming it. She's taking all of its distortions, its queernesses, its unique Indian flavors, and she's declaring it all mine, mine alone. This is the moment the poet doesn't just borrow the language, they possess it. And that powerful act of claiming the language, well, that brings us right up to today, to a point where Indian English poetry has, without a doubt, found its own confident, independent, and totally unique voice. I mean, the range of poetry today is just incredible. You've got poets like Kamala Das and Meena Alexander using the language to tackle really tough gender and social issues head-on. It's become a tool for digging into the complex legacy of post-colonialism, for breaking old taboos, and for giving a truly authentic voice to the incredibly diverse Indian experience. So, what's the big takeaway from all this? Well, that river we talked about, it's finally reached the sea. What started out as, let's be honest, an imitation of British models, kind of a colonial echo, has completely transformed. It's now this powerful, independent tool that a whole culture uses to explore itself, to question itself, and ultimately, to define itself on its own terms. And that just leaves us with one last, really fascinating thought to chew on. This whole story of Indian English poetry, it's not just about poems. It's the story of an entire culture's journey with a language. And it really makes you wonder, doesn't it? What does it truly mean to make a language your own?